we can tell them that, but of course they don't, many of them don't believe it because they think it is all just a random process. I know, see, that's what I was saying. The logic is you find a watch, you know somebody made it. You see a universe as complex as this, you know somebody made it. Anyway, so this DNA molecule, there is something really amazing about the DNA molecule. Along the DNA molecule, you know, and a DNA molecule is just two strings of atoms joined by side chains, these four kinds of molecules, molecules or what? Anyway, it's a string of atoms that tells a message along this DNA molecule. And different parts of this message tell, like there is a section on this message for I. Now, it is not a section for I as we have an I. It's a section for I-ness in general. You know how like a fly has a different kind of eye than us. You know, the fly eye is not at all like our eye. Our eye is like a mammal eye. It has, you know, the iris and the opening and the retina and all these things. A fly eye is like totally different. It's called a compound eye, and it has lots of little nerve endings that bring in light and wouldn't show an image like we see. But if you pull out a section here, which is the I section, and you take the I section from a fly and you replace in say for instance a mouse, and this is actually an experiment that has been done. You take the I section of the DNA molecule out of a fly and replace the I section in the DNA molecule of a mouse before it develops. It will develop a mouse eye. So the DNA message for I in a fly will develop a mouse eye in a mouse. And if you put the mouse DNA for an eye in the fly, it will develop a fly eye. Now, one of the important implications of this is and why this really goes against Darwin's idea of evolution. The fly developed a long time in the development of the world before the mouse. So an eye molecule was developed or created to make all sorts of different eyes, because there's about 50 different kinds of eyes. And one eye, it's called a master control gene. One master control gene is for eye. And when it was created, there was no mouse. So it was created to create a mouse eye when mice came along several 100 million years later, or 100 million years later or something. Which goes certainly against the idea of Darwin's theory of evolution, which is it is a progressive thing. So a mouse eye did not progressively develop. 100 million or more or so years before a mouse came to be, before Allah made mice, He made a gene that would make a mouse eye. Yeah, He made a gene that will make an eye no matter what type of animal life He creates. He wants them to have eyes. And so He made a gene that would make an eye for any of them, no matter what their eye was like. I mean, you know, and I just watched last night on Discovery Channel another one of the many documentaries on evolution, which seem to be an increasing number, because They're trying to convince people evolution is this random process. And they even mentioned this again. Now, how they can mention this without realizing what they are saying? I mean, how in the world are they trying to say the Darwinian theory of natural selection, how did it select for a mouse eye when it was creating a fly eye? You see, I mean, it just couldn't. When the gene was made for the fly eye, whoever made the gene for the fly eye already knew 100 million years down the line that a mouse would need that gene and what a mouse eye would be, and created the gene so it would make that. So, I mean, we have things that just totally destroy this Darwinian concept of evolution. It is so naive to think the process is random. I mean, scientists are supposed to be logical thinkers. It is just so illogical to look at what exists and think that this just happened by random chance. It is so obviously planned. So anyway, after Allah has created the most complex of the molecules have certain characteristics. They replicate, which is like reproduce. They have movement. And they take the stuff in the environment around them and use it to sustain themselves and to build new replications of themselves, which is very much like digestion. Basically, when we eat things, right, we take things from the environment around us and we eat them and we make them part of us, and when we produce children, we use those things we eat from the environment around us to, we call it in humans or in animals, we call that digestion. But the most complex molecules already reproduce themselves, they move around, and they have digestion. So what Allah does is He then, after He creates the most complex molecules, He then creates a new stage, which is biological life. And just as Allah did with the other stages, He takes a number of complex molecules, sends information to them by light, telling them to join together in a certain way to make I don't know, probably there's something simpler than an amoeba, but we'll just say, just because I don't know all the earlier stages. A cell wall with some protoplasm in here. Sure, Allah made something simpler than an amoeba, right? But once again, He took the already existing complex molecules and put them together in a way which formed biological life. Now, the biologists acknowledge they have no idea how it went from the complex molecules to biological life. They don't know why life began like this. Well, yeah, but we do, because we see exactly the same process going on, right? The same way Allah made atoms out of the subatomic particles and molecules out of the atoms. He made simple biological life. He made it from putting the previous stage together in a new organization. And then from this, Allah went through a series of stages, which is one cell, and multi-cell. Multi-cell meaning all the cells are the same. like a sea sponge. So first of all, Allah created one-celled organisms. Then Allah sent messages to one-celled organisms so that a whole lot of them got together, but exactly the same cells, and they act as one organism, but a whole lot of cells. By the way, this was the really long step as Allah developed life, biological life. Biological life developed, probably Allah developed biological life on our planet maybe 2.5 billion years ago. But to get from here to here, from one cell to multi-cell, about 2 billion years. So 2 billion of the 2.5 billion years was spent getting from the amoeba to the same cell being put together many times for multi-cell. Then Allah created 2 organs, which was basically 2 kinds of cells. This is like a jellyfish. So now Allah made some of these cells that were all the same. He made them specialize into digestive cells. So the first 2 kinds of cells together were basically body and stomach. Then Allah made many organs. And this is like a starfish or clam. But the many organs they are just randomly in the body. Then Allah puts the organs in order. Worm. So basically, excrement organs, stomach and organs, and head organs. So now we have the beginning of sort of the form that most more advanced life is in. Then we have, and this is like a chain. Then Allah makes chain with side chains. And this is like a insect. Now see, this is a chain, right? But an insect it has its organs in a row, in segments like that, but it has side chains for wings and feet and things. Then the final stage of animals, the highest form of biological life, has a brain and a nervous system. Now, one of the important things to remember the highest level of the molecules, the DNA molecule. Its big characteristic is it stores information that can be used to manipulate the environment. And what do we have the highest level of the animal doing? The brain storing information to manipulate the environment. So although I forgot all of them, if I were to show you the list of the molecules from the monatomic to the DNA, which I've forgotten, you will find each of these stages. You see the monatomic, you start with them all the same. Then, no, I'm sorry, you start with one atom alone, which is like one cell. Then you put a number of the same ones together, like is monatomic. Then you put 2 kinds together, like water. And then you put several bunches together, like many organs. Then you put the organs in a chain, which is like a polymer. And then you have a side chain, chain with side chains, and then you have a protein. And then you have the DNA, which is the nervous system. So the same sequence that Allah went through, progressing from simple molecules to complex molecules, when Allah created biological life, He went through an identical series of stages from the simple to the complex. And every one of these stages, what He did is, He went from what was existing in the previous stage and reorganized them in a more complex way for the next stage. And then what does Allah do after this? Now, you'll notice though, Allah didn't take a whole bunch of different animals and put them together to make a human being. You see, in all of the other stages, Allah took the previous stages and put them together to make the next stage. But when Allah made the next stage from the animal, He didn't do the same thing. And this constitutes special creation. Now, whether or not Allah created Adam absolutely separately from all other creation, or whether He took previous creation and altered it through the DNA molecule, it doesn't really matter. However Allah did it is fine. But if Allah did create Adam totally separately, He then created Adam with a totally separate but identical DNA to all animal life. Now, to some people, it seems to matter that Allah was created in a different process. Well, obviously, Allah was created in a different process, but people usually like to think all of these other things were created the way that I have said, but Adam was created totally separate. Now, we have no difficulty with that. I mean, if Allah wanted to do that, when you consider all the amazing things He did, it is nothing to create Adam totally separate. But there is a way that Allah created Adam. We don't know for sure what that is. But no matter which of the ways it is, it does not change our Islamic belief system. So, potentially, right, the way Allah went from simple, when Allah created an amoeba from the highest of the molecules, He put a DNA molecule with certain messages in that amoeba. Each time He wanted a more developed level of animal life to come to be, Allah altered the sequence along the DNA molecule. And so, since so much of it is the same, right, Allah just leaves almost all of it the same, including, just as I mentioned only the eye molecule, but also there is a limb molecule, a head a head gene, there's a limb gene, there's probably an organ gene, a heart gene, brain gene, for all of them. So all Allah has to do is send messages of light to say, alter or add a few molecules here and there, and we have the DNA molecule producing a different being. So each of these different levels that Allah wanted to create, all he had to do was send a message by light saying, make a slight alteration in the DNA molecule. Add a few, change a few, is really what it was. And so we have the total process by which everything we see, everything the scientists see, which exists, could have been done by Allah through a certain process that science knows takes place, that light energy tells all these things to happen. The only thing that they are not willing to agree with yet, that it comes from Allah. But where else would a message be coming from outside of space and time, telling all of these things to happen? I mean, that's obviously not random. A message is coming in telling it what to do. By the way, one other thing I forgot to mention. When Allah has photons collide with each other, there are only certain subatomic particles that will be created, even if the number is 100 or so. No others besides them. You'll never get a proton and a half or something, right? They are all, it is fixed. So Allah has a pattern of subatomic particles, and only the ones that He allows can come to be. Nothing else can come to be. And when you get to the atoms, let's just say the ones we have on Earth, we have 93 atoms. Hydrogen, the simplest, uranium, the most complex. There is no hydrogen and a half. There's no iron and 2/3, right? There are a pattern of 93 different ones that can come to be and no others. Atoms get together to form molecules. It is not that like there is an infinite number of molecules that can form. Because of the nature of the atomic structures and the way the subatomic particles are organized around the nucleus, only certain molecules are allowed to form and no others. So then, when Allah puts the molecules together to make biological life, although biological life is very diverse and we know of billions of different kinds of species, we can only assume that every one of these different species is within the list of the pattern that Allah allows. So it is not there can be no chance process to it. At every one of these levels, only ones that follow the patterns that Allah wants to have happen can happen. And all of them are leading up very specifically to Adam. This whole process, right, every step in this process, which is probably trillions of steps long. I mean, I showed it in just a few steps. There are only a few stages, but the steps within the stages are really huge. You can see how it is all directly going toward Adam. Now look at this last thing I want to show you. We have light here, which is number 1, which creates subatomic particles, number 2, which creates atoms, number 3, which creates molecules, number 4, which creates biological life, number 5, and human beings, number 6. Does anyone see any significance to the 6 stages? How many days did Allah, and the scholars have said this isn't talking about stages, it's talking about ages or periods or stages.
When you read in order from 1 to 6?
Now, 6 stages, and there's no way, each one of those stages is absolutely distinct from the others. Each one is made like the previous stage, but expressing a new characteristic. What human life does, it's like we have an animal body, but Allah has put something into us that makes us a totally new stage. And that is, He puts His spirit within. So we are like, the animals are an animal body. We are an animal body with God's spirit within. It makes us a totally new level. So at the point of Adam, it is a special creation because it is different in nature than all the other stages. Now, whether or not Allah took the DNA molecule of the developing animals and took the highest level of the animals, which was in the primate line, and altered it to make the human being, or whether Allah just totally made a new DNA totally separate from the animal line to make Adam, are the 2 possibilities. Neither one, and we don't know for sure which one it was, but no matter which of the 2 it was, it doesn't matter for our Islamic belief system. It was a separate creation, and it follows in an order. And I think it's quite amazing that it comes out to be 6 distinct stages. And you can't find another stage to put in there, and you can't eliminate one. I mean, these are 6 absolute stages, just like Allah said there would be.
What Allah mentioned in the Quran is 6 days. It's not like days that we know, from Sunday to...
Yeah.
That means these stages is days.
And actually, in one place, Allah actually uses the term stages. He doesn't say 6, but He does use, you know, that I have created you in stages. So, all of this, other than where we put Allah in, is known science. So this fits totally with science. This is the information the evolutionists use. But the evolutionists know they don't have a process by which it happens. Because they do not say, where scientists know that subatomic particles and atoms and molecules do what they do by the messages received by messengers of light. They don't actually relate that to the developmental process in evolution. And they say the process was just a random one of natural selection. So here we have a way of describing how how everything comes to be that fits with science, that fits with our Islamic belief system also. Now, think how important this is when the kids that you are teaching come to the point where they have questions about evolution, and if you accept evolution as it is taught in school, it implies God is not necessary. And there was no alternative. Here is an alternative to that, that is a better theory of how it all happened. And I have to call it a theory. I can't, even though every one of these facts is correct, it is less than 100% sure everything I have told you will turn out to be true. But everything fits so well, it is almost surely true. So we have probably, with this knowledge, caught on to how Allah brought the physical world to be, all the way from the creation of matter, from before space and time existed, up until Adam.
How do we get the fact that, in the Quran Allah says that He told the angel to get soil from earth and for Adam? I mean, can we argue that shows how Allah created human beings separately from animals?
Well, the sending of angels to earth to get the material to make Adam. That is exactly what Adam is made from, right? The soil of the earth. I mean, every one of us is made up of I'm not sure, 40 or somewhere between 40 and 50 different types of atoms that come from the earth environment around us. So it could mean that. Also, when we are told that Adam was made in paradise, but that doesn't necessarily mean not on earth. You see, in the physical world we have places. I mean, that's the nature of having 3 dimensions. You have places. The spiritual world does not have places because it's not 3-dimensional. So where in the physical universe it is acceptable to ask the question, where is something, or where did something happen? In the spiritual world, that is not a legitimate question. There is no place. It just is. And we don't know exactly what that means, but we know there are no places. So this means that it is not necessarily the case that paradise, in the way we mean somewhere different, is somewhere different than here. See, to say Adam was created in paradise does not necessarily say Allah was not created on earth, because paradise is not another place. So sending the angels to take the stuff of the earth to make Adam, it seems to be exactly what happened. It appears to have happened on earth, but whether or not that constitutes from the way Allah did it in paradise, we don't know, because we don't know what in paradise means. See, in paradise, we interpret from the point of view of what we know about a three-dimensional world of space and time. But Allah is talking about paradise, which does not include space and time. But I hope you can see the usefulness of this to give to children what a really strong protection it is against the attack against the belief in God that evolution thinking gives you. Because when they hear about evolution and they already know this, they'll say, yeah, but you left God out, and God is here and here and here, and I know why.
Do we have posters of these stages in school?
What do we, or?
Should we put posters for the children?
Well, you've probably noticed in one of our coloring books, it sort of has that in the coloring book. When we have, in our coloring book where we have Allah making the world, right? Making Khalifa. The early stages go through, sort of pictures of simple, suns and planets and coming to develop and simple life and middle of the life and complex life and atoms. But yeah, I think that it's a good idea. See, we want to get this idea deeply into the children also. And even if you cannot tell them the detail, you can tell them that there is now proof of how Allah created the universe and how He created life, and how He made the different forms of life. And it is interesting how every one of these stages is done through light.
The most common question that the children ask is, why did Allah create?
Okay, the answer to why Allah created it is so He could make a Khalifa and give His Khalifa a place to fulfill his spiritual potential. By the way, something I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about Khalifa, and as far as I've been able to tell, somebody may know something different about this, but as far as I can tell, the Islamic scholars don't talk about the role of Khalifa after death. Like we are Khalifa on earth, but they don't say about us being Khalifa in paradise. But I would assume that, obviously Allah is going to be logical and practical. Why would He create a whole universe to put His Khalifa just so we could learn to become good enough to get into paradise? If all we were going to do in paradise is sit around and enjoy great pleasure. See, I think in paradise we will have a task. And that task is going to be one that we have to be really trustworthy with. And we must prove on earth, by fulfilling our responsibility as Khalifa on earth, that we can fulfill our task in paradise that Allah wants us to do, and that is to continue as His Khalifa and continue work for Him. Now this leaves all sorts of possibilities. I don't think it is at all outside our Islamic theology, but it is not widely talked about at all. So what I'm saying is, I think the role of Khalifa continues after death into the spiritual world.
Can you say to the children that we are not only on earth, but the whole universe? For the whole
Well, this is true. We are Khalifa for the whole universe. And maybe even Khalifa for the spiritual world. See, we may be Khalifa for all existence. I think if we could know the totality of what existence means from the point of view of Allah, it might be very, very different than we think it is now. See, somehow we get the idea that, we live these lives and we have jobs and we make money and we buy food and we have families and we just go on generation after generation. But Allah's plan for His physical creation and His spiritual creation is very likely much more than we have been able to grasp so far. And another thing that I should mention, as big as Allah's physical creation is, right? This bubble of 10,000 billion stars we can see, but I proved logically by a thought example, a thought experiment, how it is really much bigger than that. But the thing that I didn't mention is, from the perspective of Allah, it takes up no space and no time. So there would be no reason why Allah could not have created an infinite number of universes simultaneously. No reason at all. And this also has been discussed by scholars, the possibility that this is not the only universe that Allah has created.
In Surah Fatiha, Rabbul Alameen. So that means the world is more than one.
Yes, Allah is described as King of the worlds, not King of the world. And world isn't meaning planet, it is referring to universe.
I mean, this goes as the knowledge progresses, like we didn't know how big the universe was, or if there could be others. Now we know, so we know that world is not just Earth. It could be more than that.
Yeah, see, I mean, a long time ago, people thought this planet was all there was, and the stars out there are just lights. Now we know the stars out there are suns also, and now we also know many of them have planets around them. And now we have some idea of a small part of the number of them, which is huge. But there may come a day when we also come to realize that the universe that we know is not the only universe, but one of an infinite number of universes. Because when I was saying how Allah is so great that He can pay attention many times every second to every single subatomic particle in the whole universe, He created it, He sustains its existence and tells it what to do constantly, and that takes no part of His effort at all. He could also do that with an infinite number of universes simultaneously, and still not take up any part of His infinite powers. See, this is how little we know about the greatness of Allah. That's why I always feel when I say Allahu Akbar, I think, I bet He's much greater than I can possibly mean by the greatest. Because greatest to us is within our conceptual system. But the actual true greatness of Allah is something, I think, totally beyond any conception we might have.
We already understand all these things. Allah created the universe very from the small thing, from the light, biological life and so on. And then how do we come to the concept of veg?
The what?
Veg, when everything finished. Because
Oh, finish.
because Allah said in the Quran, Kullu man 'alayha fan, everything is finished, finish.
Yeah.
So how do we come to that concept?
Okay, I have a really good answer to that. When the universe begins, right? It begins no time, no space, and no matter. So it has a definite beginning. I think somewhere Allah has said, either Allah or a scholar had said, Allah created the world in time and the world will be destroyed in time. Meaning, it was a beginning to time and an end to time for the physical existence. So, in the beginning, the world begins as a singularity where light comes into existence, gets bigger, and goes through this whole process. Then we end up with the universe like we have today, full of stars and planets and perhaps life on it, or perhaps we take life around the universe. Now, this universe has a geometry. It has a shape to it. And I would say that, given Einstein's general theory of relativity, the shape of the universe would be considered to be like a ball that is squashed with an infinitely small hole in the center. On one side of that ball, the hole is where light comes into existence. And if you could imagine, like in this ball or like a donut, you know how like the donut that is like brown on the inside, but if you break it, it's yellow on the inside, right? So you don't consider going around the donut like around a wheel, but from one hole in the donut around to the other hole. In that brown crust on the donut, we might consider that to be like where our bubble of the universe is. And that bubble traveled from the hole on one side, then went through this whole process, and since the universe is still expanding, we know it hasn't gone halfway yet. That it is going around, and because of its geometry can go nowhere else but around, eventually get halfway around where it has been expanding, and then start to contract and go around to the hole on the other side. And as it approaches the hole on the other side, now it is contracting, getting smaller and smaller till it reaches that hole and in a singularity disappears out of space and time.
What belongs to Allah goes back to Allah.
Just like back to where it is.
Well, to the other side of the hole. See, it goes through. I wish I had a donut or something.
Like it begins from here and then.
Yeah, I mean, if this is a donut, right, and this is the place where it comes out of, it goes around like this, right? Halfway around, it's expanding. Once it gets halfway, it continues on its journey. Now it's contracting, and it gets to the hole on the other side. As it contracts, it gets smaller and smaller, just as this one got bigger and bigger, until as it reaches the moment of leaving space and time, it disappears out of space and time in what you would call a black hole. And where it comes into existence, you would call the white hole, where through light, matter comes into existence. In the black hole, it goes out of existence. And this whole process, I used a new word for it because I didn't want to use the word evolution. I used the word I made called envolution. E-N-V-O-L-U-T-I-O-N instead of evolution, right? From a word called envolve, which means to come out of, go around, and go back into. But remember, this physical existence does not come from Allah, because that would be what's called emanationism. In Islam, if you're familiar with Islamic theology, we don't accept emanationism. We don't accept it because one of the Greek theories was, and some of the early Islamic scholars made the mistake of following the Greeks, and they said, we sort of emanated from Allah, we came out of Allah, and we'll go back to Allah. That's not right. We didn't come out of Allah, we came out of the spiritual world, which was made of Allah's created light. From that world of created light, the spiritual world, we came out of the spiritual world into a material existence. We go through a process and go back into the spiritual world of created light.
Is there any possibilities that Allah will recreate just like all this process?
Well, two things. I'd already said Allah could be simultaneously have created an infinite number of these, but this process that I was talking about, as any stuff goes through a hole that it has to get smaller and smaller as it goes through that hole, it's called the Venturi effect, and it speeds up, and there is no loss of energy. The Venturi effect adds energy to the material that is going out of space and time. So when it's leaving on one side through the black hole, it could be simultaneously coming out as the white hole on the other side. So the stuff that is leaving the universe and becoming light I say the other side, there's no other side because it's outside of space and time, but could be simultaneously be the light that is coming out at a singularity to create a new existence. Yes, it certainly could. We can't say for sure. This is something we just don't know. But it is well within possibility. And to be honest, I think likely. So, I think it may have been a bit difficult, this discussion for some of you, but I think it is a really exciting body of knowledge to know. I mean, some things, they are just a bit on the difficult side.
And some things that we just take for granted, we don't connect them together in a quick this way and see how it all relates.
Yes, look, we take so much of what Allah does for granted.
We have learned so many things, but we don't connect to each other.
Yeah.
We have learned sciences, we have learned Al-Quran, but since we learn it separately, we don't link to each other.
But you'll notice my name on this whole work, it is the name of the 3 books I wrote, Unified Theory of Existence. It is one theory that unites all knowledge. And it even unites the physical and the spiritual world. By the way, everybody probably knows Einstein's most famous, it's all full. Everybody knows this formula, right?
Yes.
The most famous scientific formula in the world. What probably you don't know, what it is known to be is pretty amazing anyway, right? That this is about the equivalency of mass and energy. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So it's saying that energy and mass are the same thing, but they have, they are equivalent. But what is more amazing, this is the formula that describes the relationship between the spiritual world and the physical world. What we call energy is the world of light. And light does not exist in the world of space, time, and matter. Light, this E is really Allah's created light. And its relationship to matter, which is the stuff of the universe, is described in this formula. So this is the formula that relates the spiritual world to the physical world.
E is the spiritual and
Zero.
Yeah. Now, Einstein didn't know that. I'll be. This one is not a fact of science. As far as I know, nobody but me has said that yet. Possibly other people have said it, and I don't know. But it is certainly not well known. And I have to admit, it just appears to be the case. I mean, there's no way I can guarantee yet that is absolutely true, but it certainly does appear to be true. See, so, and you remember earlier how I was saying the early scholars had said that Allah gave us 2 books of revelation, the Quran and the physical, the world, and we're supposed to read them in a balance. And if we don't read them in a balance, we won't understand the religion that Allah gave us, or the way of life Allah gave us, and our practice of that way of life will go badly. Well, you see what happens when you put the 2 together, how really amazing it is? I mean, this is, very few people put the 2 together. Because, I mean, not that I'm making any claim to be an Islamic scholar, but I know a lot about the theology of Islam and the metaphysics of Islam. And I also know a lot about science. And when I put the 2 together, this is what it says. And it is just astounding. I mean, what if I was a truly knowledgeable Islamic scholar with as much science as I know? How much more I could know. You know, this is why in the future we need to have Islamic scholars who are knowledgeable at the highest level of Islam and knowledgeable at the highest level of science.
Combined philosophy and science.
Well, theology and science, but really, I mean, philosophy and theology are really. Theology is like religious philosophy.
This reminded me of a story that there are 2 people. The First one is Abid al-Qalami.
Is what?
Abid, in Arabic, this Arabic term, which is he always pray to Allah blindly without any knowledge. And then the other person we call Alim, which is pray along with the knowledge. And then if this comes to these two persons, the first he came to Alim, which is has knowledge, pray Allah with knowledge. And then he asked the question, do you believe that Allah can put all this, the world into needle hole? And then the Alim said, yes, of course. Everything is possible for him because he is everything. He has power to do that. And then while the Abid, Iblis kept to him the same question, and then he answered, this is impossible. Just like he denied that Allah has power to do it. So because he believed in God's knowledge. Just like as you said, when we combine these two ayahs, which is books of the universe, and Surah and Surah,
Yes.
yeah,
And you see, I mean, all of this that I've told you is just really a small beginning to what must be available out there. You know, I mean, in both areas. I'm very knowledgeable in science, but I'm no great physicist. You know, I mean, I'm really a psychologist that happens to know quite a bit about physics. I mean, there's probably thousands and thousands of physicists in the world know more physics than me. And as an Islamic scholar, virtually every true Islamic scholar knows many times more than I know about Islam. And if you could put the knowledge of those two together, it's just astounding where it could go. And that's what we really need to do in the future. And this is what I hope we will be producing in our school, the kind of children who can do both of these. You know, and who will grow up seeing the world from both points, from both sides, from the objective and from the material and from the spiritual. And then they will be a generation that really expresses the fullness of Islam. And it is very hard to express the fullness of Islam if you don't have both sides of the knowledge. And I just might mention personally, for myself, in the first place, all of this that I told you, although I can tell you in a couple of hours, took me a really long time to come to know all this, right? I mean, literally it took me 30 years plus to put together this knowledge. So not easy to get to, but many, many times, and I still do, if I wake up at night, I don't mind waking up at night because then I have some time to just lie there very comfortably and think. And what I do, I call it communing with Allah. Communing means getting very close with. I think about what Allah is actually doing, like when He sends His message of light and gets these particles together. And I kind of perceive it happening in my mind. And it makes me feel so unbelievably close, you know. I mean, it's like an intimacy of relationship with Allah that is just intense. For me, it's like, I just can't describe the level of wonderful religious experience it is in relationship with Allah to relate Allah to these happenings, you know, and to conceptualize Allah creating this universe out of nothing and actually picture it in my mind. It's one of the ways, I think. I'm not suggesting it for everyone, but there are many, many ways to know and be close to Allah. And I think when you look at how Allah actually objectively does things, when you know how somebody does something, you can feel really close to them. It's like, you know them personally doing it.
That's why we try and get that right. Think how we need it.
Yeah. So if we can give something like this to the children, I mean, it'll be a long time till they can understand all of this. And probably some of you didn't understand everything that I've said today. but I think you have a pretty good general idea of what was said. And nicely, you can say to children honestly that everything that exists, we have a pretty good idea now how Allah did it, and we are sure Allah did it. And all the scientific theories that don't include Allah have big error in them. And so we want the children later on in life, when they are perhaps not in our school and somewhere else, and they're hearing information, to be putting Allah in the middle of all of it and seeing how Allah relates to it.